What's up, everybody? We're back this morning. Back on our man Joseph. We took a little bit of a break there in our word. We had a chapter there about his brother Judah and talked about how God can use the sinful people to accomplish his purpose, which we're all sinful people, obviously, but sinful and non-repentant, openly sinful. So we're back on Joseph, and we pick up his story. Says that the Ishmaelites sold Joseph to the Egyptians into slavery. But it says, and we're going to say this a couple of times during these verses that we're looking at, that God was with Joseph. And Joseph was assigned to Potiphar's house. Potiphar was very powerful in the land of Egypt, very rich. And Joseph did such a good job that it says that Potiphar gave him command of his whole household. And all Potiphar really knew anything about was the bread he eat. What does that mean? It means that Joseph managed all of Potiphar's finances, possessions, everything. All Potiphar could tell you about was the bread that was in front of him right now. So if you asked Potiphar what he was worth, he would have said, I don't know how much money I got in my pocket. I don't know anything else besides that. If you need to know anything else, you're going to have to ask Joseph. He was so trusted and did such a good job that Potiphar trusted him with everything. But it says that Potiphar's wife had an eye for Joseph. You know, this is our enemy at work. If Satan can't make us curse God by our circumstances, well, then he'll move on to the desires of the world. Now, I bet you Potiphar's wife was a beautiful, beautiful woman. Otherwise Satan wouldn't have used her. She was very desirable. And she makes advances on Joseph. And Joseph says, who am I to sin against my master? But more importantly, who am I to sin against God? Joseph knew what was right and what was wrong. Just as we all do. Now, Joseph predates the Ten Commandments, so they hadn't been anything about adultery yet. How did Joseph know this was wrong? This was sinful. That's God within him. We all have that moral compass inside us that God has put in there. We don't need a set of rules written down on paper or on tablets for us to know what's right and wrong. God directs us toward that. And when we do wrong, we know we've done wrong. So Joseph says, who am I to sin against God? But that wasn't good enough for her. She kept advancing until finally Joseph had to run away. And as he was running away, she grabbed his garment. her husband comes home and she says, that Hebrew that you brought into our house tried to have sex with me. Look, he even left his garment. Now this is the second time, Joseph has been perpetrated with a lie about a garment. So Potiphar says, okay, I'm going to throw him in jail. Now this is just Kevin, I think, Potiphar really didn't believe his wife all that much. Because his power, let's remember, he was very powerful, captain of the guard, and he chose to throw the Hebrew slave. I think it's important to note that she said this Hebrew slave. Here is our first instance in the Bible where the Jewish people are used by outside people like that. Anti-Semitism begins early on in our world, thousands of years ago. It says this Hebrew tried to advance on me, but her husband, instead of killing him, which he would have had every right to do, no one would have said anything, he puts him in jail. Found that kind of odd. Made me believe, maybe Potiphar didn't trust his wife, but he had to do something. So he puts Joseph in jail. And again we see, but God was with Joseph. It says even though he was in jail, the captain of the jail trusted Joseph just like Potiphar did with all his affairs. So while he was in a bad situation, he was in the best situation of the bad situation because God was with him. God understood the overall plan of what was going to be accomplished through Joseph, and God knew that Joseph had to go to jail. Because as we'll talk about tomorrow, the next time we're together, I should say, we'll see that there was a divine appointment coming in that jail cell. But Joseph, instead of pouting, walking around, disappointed, applied himself and was so regarded by the jailer that he put him in charge of everything in the jail under him. Why is that? Because God was with him. Joseph never lost sight of that fact. While early on he wasn't mature in understanding God's anointing, he always understood that, God's with me. And how did he know that? Where did that come from? While I can talk about what a bad father Joseph was overall to all of his children based on their activities, obviously Jacob/Israel poured this knowledge into Joseph. I bet Jacob told Joseph many times the story where he wrestled with God and said, I'm not going to let you go until you give me a blessing. I bet he told him about how he made him abundantly richer by making the solid cows and goats and sheep striped and speckled. I bet he told him about the ladder into heaven where God spoke to him. I bet he told him about the worship that he had at Bethel. Jacob had poured that into Joseph, as all dads should with their children. The The sad part about Jacob was that he didn't pour it into his other children, which was evident by the way they lived their life. But Joseph understood, you know what? God's with me. And while Kevin would have went, you know what? I've been doing everything right, God, and here I am in jail. And would have laid around and rolled my lip out, pouted, been mad at the world. Oh, Joseph applied himself and said, how can I be of use right where I'm at? It's just like when the Israelites were exiled for 70 years. God's instruction through Jeremiah was, grow where you're at. Grow where you're at. You know, we have a lot of people that, Christian people that go, well, I just want to know what God's will is for my life. Just want to know what God's will is. Joseph gives us a perfect example to say, if you want to know what God's will is, grow right where you're at. Apply yourself right now where you're at. And God will work out his will for you in his life. Your need to know is unimportant. If Joseph had known everything that was going to transpire after this, he would have messed it up. Just like I would. He might have become lazy and go, well, God's, all this is going to happen. I'm going to become one of the most powerful men in Egypt. I'll hang around the prison for a little while. Bide my time. I already know what's coming. But he didn't. He didn't know. Just like I don't know. So, what's my message to myself and to you that I can learn from Joseph? One, God is with me, just like he was with Joseph. He hadn't went anywhere. He's right in the same place he was that thousands of years ago, which is with his people. And two, grow where you're at, which means be the best version of yourself wherever you are, in all circumstances. And God will clearly direct his will towards you. If you're working, be the best worker there. The most trustworthy. The one that people can talk to and trust. If you're in school, be the best student. Be the best friend. In your marriage, be the best spouse. That's obviously, Joseph was so good that it was unquestionable. Look, I can trust this guy with everything I got. We're called to be that trustworthy. We are the sons and daughters of God when it's all said and done. So our actions reflect on the Father. And if we're not very trustworthy and we're kind of lazy, that doesn't reflect my God. So resist that urge. Grow where you're at. Don't pout just because things aren't going your way. And I'm not downplaying hard times. We all have hard times. And it's easy to talk about being faithful in the hard times when you're in the good times. But that's what we're called to do, is remember that you have God in your corner just like Joseph did. God bless you. I hope you have a great day.